I lost my son on a Sunday night at 9:42 p.m., and I didn't know it yet, but the real death was still coming for me. The phone call came while I was sitting in the dark, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I remember the tremor in the hospital operator's voice before she said the words. Those words that stop time. That remake you into someone else the second they leave their mouth. Your child is gone. That's what she said, basically. Not in those exact words, but that's what it meant. Elias. My only son. 37 years old. A genius with numbers and buildings and dreams. Dead. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember how I got to the hospital. I don't remember who drove me there, or if I even drove myself. I just remember standing over a white sheet in a cold room, staring at a face that looked like my son but wasn't anymore. The machines around me beeped like some cruel joke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept whispering promises he couldn't hear, promises that he'd been careful, that he'd lived good, that this wasn't supposed to happen to him. But here's the thing nobody tells you about grief. It doesn't come alone. It brings company. It brings vultures wearing expensive suits and holding briefcases full of hungry smiles. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you didn't see their betrayal coming? Have you ever invited someone into your family, fed them at your table, and watched them smile while they planned to destroy everything you built? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. That's what Verena was doing. My son's wife of 6 years. The woman I'd welcomed like a daughter. She was already thinking ahead, already doing the math, already measuring the curtains in rooms that weren't hers yet. I didn't know it then, standing in that hospital, but when I looked back on it later, I could see the exact moment when her grief shifted. It was quick. It was cold. It was about 5 minutes after the doctor left. She cried, sure. But the tears came in measured doses. Just enough to look tragic. Never enough to ruin her makeup. She even checked her reflection in the window at one point. I saw it. I was too numb to process it then, but later, when the fog started lifting, that moment burned itself into my brain. The funeral came and went like a storm you can't stop. Flowers nobody wanted. People saying words that don't help. And underneath it all, I could sense them circling. The lawyers. The accountants. Verena's family with their cold eyes and colder calculators. Everyone wanted something from Elias's death. Everyone except me. I just wanted my boy back. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming for me. Not yet. Because Verena had other plans. And in exactly 3 weeks, she was going to kick me out of my own house like I was nothing. She was going to tell me I had nothing. She was going to stand at the top of those marble steps in a white dress, like she was at some party, and tell me the only home I had left was gone. What she didn't know was that I still had something. Something she couldn't see. Something hidden in layers of legal protection that my son and I had built years ago, when we were building Drayton Holdings from nothing. Something worth $65 million. And soon, she was going to find out exactly what happens when you underestimate a man who's already lost everything. The funeral was on a Thursday, and Verena showed up in white. Not ivory. Not cream. Pure white. Like she was walking down an aisle instead of into a graveyard. I watched her stand at the edge of Elias's grave in that dress, one hand on her chest, the other hanging loose like she was posing for a photograph. 3 minutes. That's how long she stood there. Then she turned, found me in the crowd, and gave me a look that I'll never forget. Not sad. Not angry. Empty. Like she was already somewhere else. The thing about death is that it changes people. Or sometimes, it just shows you who they really were all along. I was helping with the flowers when she walked up to me. The funeral director was still hammering nails into the grave marker. Elias had been dead for 5 days. "We need to talk about the house," she said. "Not hello. Not I'm sorry for your loss. Not even let me grieve in peace. The house." I was still holding white roses. My hands were shaking. "The estate. The company. Elias's accounts. We need to get everything organized. You'll need to help me understand how things work." I stared at her. "Verena, we just buried him." "Exactly," she said, stepping closer. "Which is why we can't waste time. There are people waiting. Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors. They're all going to want to meet with me. With us. We need a plan." That's when I heard it. The shift in her voice. The way she said, "with me," like that was the important part. The way she didn't say, "for Elias," even once. I tried to comfort her. I put my hand on her shoulder, and she flinched. Not from sadness. From impatience. She pulled away and checked her phone. While standing at her husband's grave, she checked her phone and glanced at the time. Later that night, I overheard her talking to her mother in the study. I didn't mean to listen. I was just walking past the door when I heard Verena's voice drop low. "It's all mine now. Everything. The houses, the company, the investments. All of it. Elias made sure of that." Her mother laughed. Actually laughed. "You played that perfectly," her mother said. "He never saw it coming." I stopped walking. My heart went quiet in my chest. I wanted to believe I'd misheard. I wanted to believe that grief does things to your mind, makes you paranoid, makes you hear things that aren't there. But I knew what I'd heard. I'd heard the truth wrapped up in casual conversation. Verena had never loved my son. She'd never even liked him. She'd invested in him. Like he was a stock portfolio. I went to my room and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about Elias at 17, showing me the blueprints for his first development deal. His eyes had been so bright, so full of belief in the future, so full of belief in people. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stop her right away. I was going to let her show the world exactly who she was. And then, I was going to make sure she paid for every single lie. 3 days after the funeral, my lawyer called me. His name is Richard. He's been with our family for 20 years. He's the kind of man who doesn't waste words. "Silas, we need to talk about the will," he said. We met at his office downtown. The conference table was mahogany, and the windows looked out over the city that Elias had conquered. The city that was now going to watch his widow tear his legacy apart. "I pulled the original," Richard said, sliding a folder across the table. 40% to Verena, 40% to the family trust, 20% to charity. That's what Elias signed off on 4 years ago. "I remember," I said. "But here's what you need to know. 3 weeks ago, Elias came to see me." My head snapped up. What? He was worried. He said Verena had been asking more and more questions about the company finances, about his personal accounts, about how much he was actually worth. He wanted to protect you. Richard pulled out another document. My hands started shaking before I even read it. "He moved his personal fortune into the Drayton Trust," Richard said. $65 million. Stocks, property, liquid assets. Everything outside the company structure. Everything protected. He made me promise I wouldn't tell anyone until after he died. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Elias had been thinking about this. He'd suspected something. And he'd protected me. "The thing is," Richard continued, "Verena doesn't know about this trust. As far as she knows, everything is in the company assets. Everything's in the will. But the will she's about to inherit from? It's mostly empty. The real money is already in your hands. You're the trustee. I sat back in my chair. The city outside kept moving. Cars honked. People walked. The world didn't stop for this moment, but mine did. So she's going to take control of nothing, I said quietly. She's going to take control of nothing, Richard confirmed. Unless you let her. I looked at him for a long time. I thought about Elias sitting across this same table, worried about his father, protecting his mother's memory, trying to do the right thing even when his wife was circling like a shark. Don't tell her, I said. Let her think she won. Let her take the house, the company title, everything she can grab. Let her show the world exactly what she is. Richard nodded. He understood what I was saying without me having to say it out loud. I'm going to let greed expose itself, I said. And then, I'm going to make sure she never forgets the day she tried to steal from Elias Drayton. Within 2 weeks, Verena was going to call me with a different tone in her voice. Fear instead of confidence. And by then, it would be far too late for her to do anything about it. The gates locked on a Tuesday. I came home from the cemetery where I'd been sitting with Elias for most of the day. The sun was starting to set, turning the sky orange and purple. I was tired in a way that sleep can't fix. I was tired in my bones, in my soul, in the parts of me that remembered how to be alive. I pulled up to the security gate of the mansion, the home I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago. The home where Elias was born. The home where he'd grown up into the man he became. My keycard didn't work. I tried it again. Nothing. The gate stayed locked. The red light blinked at me like a countdown. One of the guards walked up to the car. His name was Marcus. I'd hired him in 2008. I'd paid for his daughter's college tuition when his wife got sick. I'd known him for 17 years. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Sir, he said quietly, we've been instructed not to let you through. Instructed? By who? Mrs. Drayton, sir. The words hit different when it's someone else saying them. When it's not Verena's cold voice, but Marcus's apologetic one. When it's real. Marcus, I own this property. Not anymore, sir. She has papers. She's got the deed. Behind him, at the top of the marble steps, Verena appeared. She was wearing a white dress. Again. A different white dress, but white nonetheless. Like she was celebrating something. Like this was a victory lap. You don't live here anymore, Silas, she called down, her voice carrying across the courtyard. This house is mine now. Everything Elias left is mine. I suggest you leave before I call the police and have you removed as a trespasser. I stared at her. I'd known this was coming. Richard had warned me. But knowing something and experiencing it are two different things. I built this house, I said. Well, you're not living in it anymore, she replied, holding up a document. Elias revised his will before he died. New will, new terms. You've got nothing. Not this house. Not the company. Not a single penny. It's all mine. The gates closed with a metallic sound that's going to echo in my head forever. I drove away from my own house like a man leaving a funeral. Because that's what it was. Another death. Another loss. My home, my legacy, my place in the world. Gone. Taken by someone I'd fed at my own table. I slept in my car that night in a parking lot 2 miles away. The seats were cold. The steering wheel was hard under my hands. I watched the stars and thought about promises. Elias had promised me I'd never be alone. That night, alone in my own car, parked outside my own life, I swore on his grave that his promise wasn't going to die with him. I swore that she was going to regret every single word she'd said to me at the top of those steps. And I swore that I was going to make sure Elias's legacy meant something. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted justice. There's a difference, even if most people can't see it. The next morning, I called Richard. "Come to my office," he said. "There's something you need to see." I drove there with my stomach in knots. My whole life was outside the law now. I had no home, no legal claim to anything. All I had was what Elias had secretly given me, and the question of whether that was going to be enough. Richard's office was the same as always. The mahogany table, the city view, the photographs on the walls. But this time, when I walked in, Richard pulled out a map. Not a geographical map. A financial one. "The Drayton Trust," he said, pointing to a complex diagram. "Layers of legal protection built by you and Elias back in 2005. It's a fortress, Silas. Designed to protect the family legacy from hostile takeovers. From corporate raiders. From exactly this kind of situation." He flipped to another page. 3 years ago, Elias transferred his personal fortune into this trust. Every penny. $65 million. Stocks in his name, property deeds, investment accounts, liquid assets. All of it moved out of his personal estate and into the trust structure. I was reading but not understanding. Not yet. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Richard said slowly, "that the will Verena is inheriting from is basically empty. The cars, maybe. Some furniture. The mansion itself, technically, but even that's mortgaged back to the trust through a complex debt structure. What she thinks she's winning. It's a shell game. The real money was never in that will. It was never on the table for her to take." I sat down. My legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. "He did this on purpose," I said. "He did this because he knew," Richard corrected. "He saw what she was. He wanted to protect you. And he wanted to protect the company, his life's work, from falling into hands that didn't deserve it." We sat in silence for a minute. Just me and Richard and the weight of what my son had done for me. "So what now?" I asked. Richard smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been waiting for this moment. "Now," he said, "we let her think she won. We let her believe she's untouchable. And then, when she gets comfortable with her victory, when she starts spending money she doesn't actually have and signing contracts without reading them, we show her exactly what happens when you underestimate a dying man's love for his father." "You want to set a trap," I said. "I want to set a perfect trap," Richard corrected. "And I want to make sure she walks into it with her eyes wide open." That's when I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about spite or anger or hurt feelings. This was about Elias. This was about honoring his memory by protecting what he'd built. This was about making sure that greed didn't win. That loyalty did. That integrity mattered. For the first time since my son died, I felt something other than grief. I felt ready. And Verena, in her white dresses and her confident smiles, had absolutely no idea what was coming for her. Verena didn't wait long before she started spending money that wasn't hers. 2 weeks after she kicked me out, a gossip magazine ran a feature called "The New Queen of Drayton." There she was, standing in the foyer of my house, our house, in a designer dress that cost more than some people make in a year. She was smiling. Actually smiling. Like someone had just handed her the world and she'd already decided to burn it down. "I'm redecorating," she told the journalist. "Everything Silas did was so dated. So corporate. I want this house to feel alive. I want it to feel like me." The article went on. New furniture from Milan. Renovations that cost $500,000. A wine collection she was buying from a private estate in Napa. She was spending Elias's money like it was an endless well, like it would never run dry. Like consequences were something that happened to other people. I watched from a distance. From the apartment I'd rented with money Richard had quietly transferred to me from the trust. A small place. 1 bedroom. Nothing like what I'd built. But it was mine. And it was where I sat, reading these articles, watching her parade around in my son's legacy like it was a costume. She didn't even try to be subtle about it. She threw a party. 200 guests. Valet parking. A catering company that flew in from San Francisco. I saw the photos online. Verena in the middle of it all, champagne in hand, her mother on one side, her society friends on the other, all of them laughing about something that wasn't funny. The thing about greed is that it's never quiet. It's always loud. It's always desperate to prove itself. It always wants witnesses. That's when she made her first mistake. She called Richard. She wanted to consolidate all of Elias's business accounts. She wanted everything in one place so she could manage it better. She wanted to merge his personal holdings with the company structure. She wanted total control, which meant she needed total access. Richard called me. She's ready, he said. She's comfortable. She thinks she's won. She's about to sign papers that will give her exactly what she thinks she wants. What kind of papers? I asked. Consolidation agreements. 47 pages of legal language. Most of it is standard accounting stuff. She won't read it. Her lawyers barely skimmed it. But buried in there, in Section 12, Paragraph 4, is a clause that transfers all her shares in Drayton Holdings back to the trust if she commits breach of fiduciary duty. I didn't understand. Translation, Richard said. If she spends company money on personal expenses that exceed $250,000, she loses everything. I felt something in my chest shift. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. Like finally, after weeks of numbness, I could see the path forward. Can she read the clause if she looks? I asked. Technically yes, Richard said. But she won't. People like Verena don't read contracts. They just sign them. They assume the world revolves around them too much to contain traps. We set the trap. The 47-page document arrived at Verena's lawyer's office on a Monday. I watched through Richard's assistant as Verena flipped through it. Actually flipped. She spent maybe 45 seconds on the entire thing. Her lawyer spent a bit longer, but he was working for her now, and working for someone like Verena means you don't ask too many questions about documents that look official and sound important. She signed it on Wednesday. By Friday, she'd spent $300,000 on furniture for the master bedroom. Italian leather. Hand-carved wood. Marble that was shipped from a quarry in Portugal. She posted photos online. She was so proud. She was so certain that this was her life now. That she'd won. She had no idea she'd just triggered the mechanism that would destroy her. I spent that weekend at Elias's grave. I brought flowers. White lilies, his favorite. I sat on that bench and told him everything. I told him about the trap. I told him about Verena's greed. I told him about the clause in the contract that she'd signed without reading. And then I told him something that surprised me. I'm not happy about this, I said out loud. I thought I would be. I thought watching her fall would feel like justice. But it just feels like another loss. Like another way my son's death gets twisted into something ugly. The wind picked up. The leaves moved. The world didn't answer, but somehow, in that silence, I felt Elias telling me that this was the right thing. That protecting his legacy wasn't ugly. That making sure greed didn't win was justice, not revenge. There's a difference. The next Monday, Verena spent another $450,000 on jewelry. A diamond necklace. Matching earrings. a bracelet that had been in some royal collection in Europe. She wore it all to a charity gala. She looked like a queen. She looked like someone about to lose everything. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Verina's voice was different. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the coldness. What was left was panic. Silas? Oh my God, Silas, something's wrong. My bank accounts are frozen. All of them. My lawyers are saying something about a breach of fiduciary duty. There's a hold on my access to the company accounts. What's happening? What did you do? I let her panic for a few seconds. I let her sit with the fear. Then I said it quietly. Check the signature on your contract. The consolidation agreement. Read section 12, paragraph 4. Silence. The kind of silence that means someone's world is collapsing in real time. The kind of silence where you can hear the exact moment when understanding arrives. No, she whispered. No, that's not. I didn't know. You didn't read it, I said. That's the problem. You assumed the world owed you something. You assumed that money and status and a pretty face would always be enough. You assumed you could take my son's legacy and reshape it into your own personal trophy case without consequences. My lawyers, she started. Your lawyers work for you, I cut in. They don't work against you. They didn't see the trap because they weren't looking for one. Neither were you. Greed doesn't look for traps. Greed just looks ahead to the next thing it can steal. I'll sue, she said. I'll fight this. You'll lose, I said. Every document you signed has your initials on it. Every signature is authentic. You gave me everything I needed. You gave it to me yourself. She hung up. No goodbye. Just the dial tone. Just the sound of someone's life ending the way my son's did. Suddenly. Without warning. Without a second chance. But unlike my son, Verina had chosen this. She'd decided who she wanted to be. And that decision was going to define the rest of her life. I sat in my small apartment and thought about Elias. I thought about whether he would have been proud. I thought about whether justice and revenge were really different things, or if I was just telling myself that to sleep at night. Then Richard called. It's starting, he said. The investigation. The forensic accountants. The media. It's all starting now. You ready for this to get ugly? I thought about my son's face under that white sheet. I said yes. The headlines came like an avalanche. Widow accused of fraud. Missing millions in Drayton Holdings. Investigation launched into estate mismanagement. The journalists descended on Verina like she was breaking news, because she was. Because a beautiful, wealthy woman destroying herself makes for great television. The investigators found everything. They found the forged documents she'd submitted to the court, trying to convince everyone the will had been changed. They found the falsified financial statements. They found the personal expenses she'd charged to company accounts. They found the evidence of breach of fiduciary duty buried under layers of her own carelessness. She tried to blame her lawyers. They blamed her. Everyone blamed everyone. It was a symphony of betrayal, and Verina was conducting it all by herself. Within 2 weeks, she lost her seat on the board. Within 3, the board voted to revoke her access to company funds. Within a month, the properties started being repossessed. The mansion that used to be mine was seized as part of the settlement. The cars went back to the dealership. The jewelry was liquidated. I visited Elias's grave through all of it. I sat on that bench and watched my son's empire stabilize under new leadership. I watched people who actually cared about his legacy step in and protect what he'd built. I watched the company thrive again, and I realized something that surprised me. I was proud. Not proud that Verina had fallen. but proud that Elias's vision had survived her. Proud that his genius hadn't been erased by her greed. Proud that justice, real justice, had actually worked. One afternoon, I was sitting at the grave when a woman approached me. It was Verina's mother. Her face was hard. Her clothes weren't as expensive as they used to be. "I don't suppose you'd consider being merciful," she said. I looked at her without saying anything. "My daughter made mistakes," she continued. "But she's still family. She's still human." "My son was human too," I said. "And he's dead. Your daughter kicked me out of my home and took what didn't belong to her. She didn't do that out of desperation. She did it out of greed. There's no mercy for that." She walked away. I watched her go. And I realized that I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. Tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep can reach. This whole thing, the trap, the investigation, the fall of Verena Drayton, it hadn't brought my son back. It hadn't fixed anything. It had just proven what I already knew. That loyalty matters. That integrity matters. That you can't steal from people and expect the universe not to notice. But here's what I did learn. Sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to make sure their legacy survives. And sometimes, making sure greed doesn't win is the closest thing to love that we can give. I'm standing at Elias's grave on a Sunday, like I do every Sunday. The flowers are fresh. The stone is clean. The world keeps moving around this place where my son will never move again. Verena sent me a letter last month. It came to my apartment, forwarded through Richard. I didn't open it. I burned it. Whatever she had to say, whatever apology or excuse or plea for forgiveness she'd written, it didn't matter. Some things are too broken to fix with words. The investigation wrapped up 2 months ago. The charges were filed. Verena lost everything: the mansion, the money, the status, the lies. She's living somewhere quiet now. I heard through Richard that she'd left the city. That she'd disappeared into whatever life people like her disappear into when the world stops rewarding them for being beautiful and cruel. I didn't get everything back. I didn't want to. The mansion went to a development company that Elias had been mentoring. The company is thriving under new leadership. I'm serving as an advisor now, helping guide decisions, making sure that the legacy my son built continues to matter. That's enough for me. The truth is, I don't spend much time thinking about revenge anymore. I think about Elias. I think about the day he brought Verena home and introduced her with such pride. I think about how he couldn't see what she really was. I think about how love can make you blind, but it can also make you protective. That last part saved me. His love for me, even though he was gone, even though he couldn't speak, even though he was just dust and memory. His love protected me when I couldn't protect myself. Greed blinds people. But loyalty and love and integrity, those things see clearly. Those things survive. Those things build empires that last. If you're sitting at home right now listening to this story, and you're wondering if you should trust the person in front of you, I'll tell you what I learned. Pay attention to how they treat people when no one's watching. Pay attention to whether their love is real or just calculated. Pay attention to the details, because the details are where the truth lives. And if someone you love is trying to protect you, really protect you, deep down, listen to them. Don't assume you know better. Don't assume you're smarter than greed. Listen. Believe. Let them save you. I still visit this grave every Sunday. I still bring white lilies. And every time I stand here, I tell my son the same thing. His death didn't break me. His legacy saved me. And his love for me, the kind that reaches across death itself and still protects, that's the most powerful thing I've ever known. That's the inheritance that matters. Not the money. Not the company. Not any of it. Just love. Just loyalty. Just the knowledge that someone loved you enough to protect you, even from beyond the grave. If this story moved your heart, if it made you think about loyalty and legacy and what really matters in life, please subscribe to this channel. Turn on your notifications. Don't miss the stories that are coming, because there are more. There are always more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you would have done in Silas's shoes. Tell me about a time when you realized someone loved you enough to protect you. Tell me about your own journey through grief and justice and finding your way back to peace. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's struggling with betrayal, someone who's lost and trying to find their way, share it with them. Because sometimes, the stories we hear at exactly the right moment are the ones that save our lives. This is Silas Drayton. And this is what justice looks like when it's patient enough to let the truth speak for itself. Subscribe, share, and I'll see you in the next story.